Hey, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Eric Marquez. I'm your host, and I'm here with two good friends. I have the lead pastor for New Life Community Church, Josiah Job.
Hey, guys.
And then we have the director of New Life Centers, Matt DiMatteo. Say hello, buddy.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. And so, thanks for being here, guys. It's good to be here. I'm really excited about what we get to talk about, right? This is something that we've kind of talked about doing for a while, and we haven't done it, but I want to make sure that we get right to it. We're talking about New Life Centers, right? And that's a big thing to talk about in a short amount of time, but we're going to try to honor your time. And really, the goal of this is to bring awareness of what New Life Centers is, but also to inspire the person out there. Maybe you're watching this to dream big, to do something for the Lord in your lifetime. And so let's kind of just jump right into it. You guys good?
Yeah.
Ready to rock.
First, I want to talk about, New Life Centers is exploding. I mean, right now, as we're recording this, we're in the new Pan de Vida building. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. But New Life Centers is exploding. It's, staff, influence, reach, all of that is really great. But it didn't start there, right? So, Matt, why don't you talk to us about the origins, or just how, about the origins, how New Life Centers started.
Yeah, so, New Life Community Church starts 1986, small neighborhood church, dozen or less people at 44th and Paulina. And as we grew in influence and started to reach more people, Pastor Mark, our founding pastor, was driving down Kedzie Avenue right here in the neighborhood, got to 39th and Kedzie, and looked and saw a young person that used to come to church, hadn't been in about 3 months, and pulls over and starts talking to Freddie and says, "Hey, Freddie, haven't seen you in a while." And Freddie kind of hangs his head and says, tells him he joined a street organization, a street gang. He had gotten shot 3 months earlier. And Pastor Mark realized we're not going to reach the Freddies of the city through just Sunday morning celebrations, through just Sunday morning church. And so the vision of this idea of New Life Centers, what could we do to reach the disconnected young people of Chicago, was born in the early to mid 90s, and then really came to fruition when we launched it in 2005.
Now, did you come in 2005? When did you join?
I joined in 2000.
2000.
So I joined New Life in 2000, so I've been part of New Life Center since the beginning.
Wow, that's awesome. And Josiah, you kind of been on this journey too for the last couple years, and talk to us about how you've seen, as the leader of New Life Community Church, New Life Centers, the way it started and the dream. Talk to me about the dream of how this would work together.
Yeah, I would actually pause real quick. I will answer that question, but I do think that, Matt, maybe you can give us kind of maybe define what New Life Centers is.
Yep.
Just kind of assuming that maybe if there's somebody that doesn't know, I know a lot of people are going to be from New Life and may know what New Life Centers is, but what is New Life Centers? What does New Life Centers do? And maybe what's the mission?
Yep. Yeah, so New Life Centers is a separate nonprofit 501c3 that was launched in 2005 as a way to really connect with disconnected young people. I would say in our early years, we kind of viewed it as pushing everything good or community serving under it. And we were figuring out what does it mean to have a nonprofit. And in 2007, we really started to reach gang-involved youth on probation, mentoring them, as I was hired as the youth pastor in 2006. And in Little Village, where we sit right now, is the largest Mexican community in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. About 80,000 people live within 4 square miles. About 40,000 are under the age of 25. So within 2 miles of this building, there's 40,000 youth. And so we realized, how do we, as a church, connect with the neighborhood and see the needs and meet the needs? So my wife started an after-school program 22 years ago, and we started working with K to 8th graders. That really was the beginning seeds of New Life Centers. Then as we formalized, we spent the first 5 years, again, trying to do just community outreach and good. But about 12 years ago, we saw this window right here that we really want to focus on is this disconnected young people. Mm-hmm. So 4 to 24. And as we've grown, we've seen God do amazing things. So again, we use it. It's launched by the church. It's right in cohesion with the church. The church is a parent organization, and we work hand in hand. All of our centers are within our church buildings, but it's a vehicle to really be able to connect with disconnected young people. Yeah. And now, as we've grown, it's impacting the city, neighborhoods, city structures, et cetera.
And the top 5 things categories that you guys focus on?
Yep.
Say them because I don't remember them. There's so many. I always remember 3 out of the 5. But
so our 5 cores after 17 years, mentoring. So walking life on life with young people. We have about 400 mentoring matches. 2016, we were awarded the top mentoring program in the state of Illinois. So mentoring is life on life. We base it on 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 8. We loved you so much, we shared with you not only God's good news, so the hope of the gospel, but our own lives too. So it's the hope of the gospel with life together. Second pillar is education, so that's after-school programs. That's safe havens for kids in Little Village and Humble Park. And that's 5 days a week of programming. That's after-school Bible class, gym class, snacks, homework. Sports is the third pillar, so creating safe spaces. Play is one of the number one ways for kids to deal with trauma. And man, the job of a child should be to play. And so we use the power of sport to build community. The fourth pillar is peacemaking. And so in Chicago, obviously there's violence is one of our challenges. And so we do an entire piece of our work is in Illinois Youth Corrections. So in St. Charles, Warrenville, and Chicago, with any youth that goes through the justice system. We have 12 street outreach workers that respond to every incidence of violence. And then we have a team of aftercare and resiliency services that help families in need crisis, case managers. And then our food distribution, that's been going on for a while. So mentoring, education, sports, peacemaking, and food distribution.
Yeah, and it's really grown, right? It didn't start like that. It's really expanded into really where God's brought it today, and it's pretty amazing to be able to see where it's at. And Eric, to swing back around to your question, I think you were asking kind of how does the church and centers work together or something along those lines. And I think it works beautifully, as Matt said. The centers, teams, and ministries are housed right now out of the New Life Church buildings, right? So there's a congregation that's meeting on Sunday in Humble Park or in Little Village, and out of those buildings, there's staff meeting there, there's mentoring happening, there's food distribution happening there, and so there's really a beauty. I mean, what we've been able to see and what we'd like to see continue on in the future in a strong way is we really want to see people from the church, people who are deeply committed to Christ and followers and mature in Him, really be the muscle behind New Life Centers, right? We want to see some of our best leaders, some of our best staff who are moving from maybe a secular job into saying, hey, I'd love to put my time and energy into a ministry that's making a real hands and feet impact in Chicagoland area, right? Yeah. And so I think the beauty is that all throughout the Bible we see that the church is called to do good, right? And to show the love of Christ and to be the light of Christ. And a lot of the world doesn't understand small groups or maybe a church service or a prayer meeting. It's like, that's not what I need. And so but there is a need for help with my youth, get my kids off the street, help me with some prevention. Hey, I need food and I'm in a pandemic and I don't have any resources because I just lost my job. Can you help me? And so I think that centers is able to be this amazing bridge of kind of a two-step approach is the way I've talked about it. An amazing bridge to be able to reach people that are not looking for God, but are looking for relief. Yeah. And in the looking for relief stage, the church is able...
Or even hope.
Or hope. Yeah. And the church centers, New Life is able to come beside them and really say, here, let me help you with this. And I really think that creates an open door for the gospel, which is ultimately our end goal, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't want to just feed people. We don't want to just take youth. I mean, all of that is, we do want to do that, but it's not the end goal for us, right? Yeah. That's a means to an end. And the end is we want people to be transformed at the deepest root of who they are, right? At their heart, like we're all here. I mean, we're followers of Christ. Right. It's the biggest impact upon our life. We want to be so transformed.
We're going to get into that in a little bit more later in the episode. But what I really want to focus on right now is because New Life Centers, right? You say 2005, been here since 2000, jumping in and man, I want to just like pause and think back to what gave you, Matt, I'm talking to you, what gave you, did you feel adequate to take this job when you first stepped on?
Oh, for sure not.
No, what were some of the fears or some of the things that you were questioning about? I mean, it's not a small task, right? To reach and to these kind of distant or at-risk, young people, 4 to 24. That's a big gap, right? And I'm sure even those parameters weren't all set in stone. But like, think back to 2000, 2005. Yeah. What's going through your mind, right?
What age were you? What age were you when you took over as the executive director?
Well, I started all of this at 18. So I started as a Moody student at 18, working in the neighborhood as a volunteer. When I came on staff, I would have been 2006. That's a lot of math right now. I'm turning 40.
yeah.
I'm turning 40. So I started at 18. I'm turning 40. So 2013, 9 years ago, I was early 30s as an executive director. But Sarah and I, my wife, we started this as 18 and 20-year-olds, and have been doing it. And I think we had no idea what we're doing. We still don't have any idea what we're doing, but whatever's in front of us, being faithful and available to what's right there. So young people in front of us, loving on them, connecting with them, that starts to grow. It was interesting, kind of back to your history and what kind of drew me into the work. 2006, I sat down as the youth pastor and was with Paco, and we said, man, there's 40,000 youth within 2 miles of this building. What do we do? I grew up as a pastor's kid, so I knew I could do youth group. I love sports. I love baseball. I love basketball. So we used sport and a traditional youth group model. And there was a local nonprofit who did a quality of life plan for Little Village. How do you better the neighborhood? How do you improve schools, businesses, safe spaces? And there's a 50-page document. And in the middle of it, they had a map. And there was a list of churches, schools, businesses. New Life wasn't even on the list of churches. Wow. So Paco and I realized if our building were to burn to the ground, nobody would care. And I think that's an interesting question we as the church should ask ourselves. If where you're located were to up and leave, burn to the ground, you left that neighborhood, would the community care? And we realized probably wouldn't. We were just playing church in a neighborhood, but we weren't truly being a community church, impacting. Yeah. And so we actually sat down with leaders from that agency and said, we repented. We said, you're doing the work the church should be doing. And we just got the church out of the four walls. We spent a year. Ray Bakke, a good friend of ours who just passed, he's spoken a lot into our ministry and our work. And he said, find where God is already at work without you and go there. And when you stop making it about your church name, just the banner of New Life, when you start to make it about the kingdom, that's when God will really move. And so after a year of just getting out of the four walls, what I did, I reffed basketball games, I flipped burgers, and I loved on people. I know how to do that. Yeah. And from there, God opened the door to start to the local probation officer. We started mentoring youth on probation, and God opened the doors from there. So I say that to say, each step of the way, God's equipped us. Right now, we're much larger. We have 80 staff. If you would have told me in 2005 that in 2022 you'd have 80 staff and a $7 million budget, I would have said, dude, we can hang it up. We'll have arrived. Yeah. Now I have different challenges. Yeah. How do you manage 80 staff? How do you impact that large of an organization? We're in 5 neighborhoods instead of 1. So right now, I'm hungry and looking for leadership, help, support, wisdom. So I just say being available to ask God for wisdom to lead with exactly what you have, and he takes care of the rest.
I think that's what's so important. The reason I wanted to talk about the history is because the way things started matched with like the circumstances mixed with the grit of really you and Sarah. In partnership with New Life Community Church, there's a really healthy chemistry there that really started all of this, that gave opportunity to something like this. And I think it's one who wants to follow the Lord and throw their life into something, right? We live amongst a generation that, the stats are out that they want to throw their life. They want their life to mean something. They want their life to accomplish something that is good, but that doesn't happen on accident, right? Right. It doesn't happen on accident. Small beginnings, right? Trying this, trying that, loving on people, that simple thing. But yet how far it's come is really amazing. And that's really what this story is, being inspired about, what God can do if we allowed ourselves to dream big, but then got around, like you said, see where God's moving and go there.
Yep.
I think that's huge.
Let me ask this. I'm curious, Matt. You grew up in Indiana, right? So, Little Village is very different than Indiana. And as we're talking about, really gearing this podcast towards, and this episode specifically, to people kind of dreaming about the ways that God can use them, man, I don't think, or I guess that you never imagined that you'd maybe be serving in this community. And there's probably 1,000 easier communities or cities to be in than in Little Village, right? A lot of different places, but yet you and Sarah have been so faithful to stay here, to be here, to live in the community, to do the ministry. What compels you or draws you to serve in a neighborhood like this, where there's easier places that you can serve at?
Yeah, I would say, again, Sarah was asked to come lead the after-school program 22 years ago, and so I followed. I like to say she was chasing me, but I was actually chasing her. And while we were dating, while we were dating, really just started, reaching young people. And this is where God planted us. I mean, it was literally the director who was here called Moody and said, hey, do you have anybody, preferably Latina, who's an education major? And Sarah was in this props class that got the call.
Wow.
So we came out. That was the connection to New Life.
You didn't get the call. Is there any white guy from Indiana?
No, we're kind of low on the list, I guess. I don't know. But it was interesting to see as we just said, hey, and Sarah grew up overseas. She was a missionary kid.
Yeah.
I grew up as a pastor's kid. I was a missions major at Moody. Our plan was to go overseas, to Brazil. Me and you went to Brazil on a vision trip, thinking that's where we were going to serve the rest of our lives. But when we started getting out of the four walls, reaching young people, God had a different plan. And so I think it's just being available to write the story. I would have never written this story. Even this space we sit in is a God story we'll talk about in a bit. But I think it's just being available, knowing, and seeing, where is God already working? And so I think for me, having been here, I am an outsider. And so learning the language, being connected. But what I learned, I used to think at the beginning that, the best people to reach gang members, to walk with, are the former gang members or guys from the neighborhood. And I still agree. That's a key part of it. But I've seen hundreds of examples by now. If somebody is, filled with the Spirit of Christ, is willing and available, will step out and just connect and love on people, regardless of who you are, what you look like, etc., God can use that. God can use that. And so I think we've been blessed to be on the journey. I think the beautiful thing is for Sarah and I, we're in it together. Sarah's full-time at Centers.
Yeah.
We live 4 blocks from here. And some of the key points of what we call Christian community development. There's a whole movement called CCD. And it's really about, a key part of it is us relocating and living here. Because the challenges of this neighborhood are our challenges. My daughter in her kindergarten year lost her best friend to gun violence. My kids are facing, and they're in local public schools here, so the challenges we face here. We just buried an 8-year-old girl who was supposed to be part of our Little League, and my kids felt that, our neighborhood felt that. And so it's not like we're airdropping into a place and then leaving. I think there's power in being willing to say, hey, we live here, this is us, this is the church. And it gets messy, it gets blurry, but I think the church should be the one leading the way.
And
the
it
church
is kind
should be
of
one at
very
the
much
table.
missionary oriented, right?
Yeah.
I'm reminded of this story. I was on a mission trip in Ghana, and we went to go visit this graveyard, and it was a Presbyterian missionaries that came there, and the story reads, there's like a plaque that reads, about their story. They brought all of their stuff in coffins when they went there. So there's just mental picture of like, we're coming here and we're gonna die here, whether because they kill us or of old age. This is where we're gonna be, but we're all in.
It was like a powerful symbol to just kind of let them know.
It always stuck with me,
Yeah.
I'm prepared, and so I think there's something to that, of just being here, being in the community where you say like, it's not their problem, it's our problem, right?
Yeah, I think we as Americans or Westerners, we always want to climb the ladder, right? We always want to find the next thing. And so whether it's in work, whether it's positions, and I think there is the draw of the new, the flashy thing, right? And I think a lot of people jump around, and hey, if that's your journey, that's what it is. But when you have, and this is the story of New Life, a lot of our pastors are original from the original launch team. Mark, Mike, John, etc., who are here since the beginning. When you have, and Eugene Peterson talks about this, is kind of this long faithfulness in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
You're continually there. You're there, and you're going to go through the good, the bad. Sometimes people say, oh, we're experts in mentoring or this. I think we have a lot of expertise, but I think we're still here.
Yeah.
A lot of people move, transition, are there, but we're still remain faithful. And I think that's something that's not as flashy for people. But I think a key part of longevity in ministry is when you're faithful in the same spaces over and over, God's going to move.
What did it take? What did it take to get started? So, again, kind of thinking back towards the beginning, we're kind of talking about the history here, the vision, the history, the heart. So we got this dream, right? You and your wife are already kind of working in this area. You get the call from New Life, but New Life Centers doesn't exist yet. what does it cost, or what did we use?
Yeah.
How did we start, And I don't know if you have any information on this, but
I can
how did
tell
we
the
start?
story of how we launched kind of the mentoring program is a good example. So we sit down with the local probation officer. She said, hey, are you willing to mentor gang-involved youth on probation? I'm sitting there thinking, I gave him the classic pastor answer, let me pray about it. Yeah, let me pray about it. I wasn't going to pray about it. That got him out of the office, and hey, cool, I could tell him that later in the week, I think we're good. But I sent out a text to the New Life Network, and 10 men and women from Midway and Little Village rose up and said, let's try this. And we had 10 volunteers who said, we'll mentor gang-involved youth. And we started with 10 youth on probation, all of them gang-involved, all of them with gun cases.
Wow.
And in the first 3 months of us launching, one youth came to Christ, got baptized, turned his life around, which is like a world record. That doesn't happen at that pace.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was God giving us first fruits to say, hey, keep going here. But we had another youth who caught a murder case and is still locked up today.
Yeah.
And so it was
And what was the budget for all this?
Oh, zero. We
$0.
did garage sales. We ate Little Caesars pizza every Friday night for 3 years. We would do big garage sales seriously and make $500 to $1,000. That would sustain us for the next 4 weeks.
Wow.
People paying out of pocket. We didn't receive a single grant of any substance for 5 years.
Wow.
So we launched a nonprofit and did it volunteer. We had a guy who left his job as a nurse and volunteered full time. Lived off his wife's salary and volunteered for a year full time.
Was that Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
He's actually coming today.
No way.
Into town. And so those kind of stories of people who are willing to,
Yeah.
hey, give up kind of the dream, the resources, the money. And then, man, that was the seed that has grown into this amazing ministry.
Wow.
And so it's an army of volunteers. It's full faith. It's, the power of Scripture and trusting in God.
Yeah.
And people don't see that, right? People see, where things are now, right? They
Yeah.
see you in your present moment. They see you
Yeah.
on your mountaintop now. They see where an organization is now. But they don't see the Little Caesars for 3 years and and the garage sales to sustain for 4 weeks and the all the toil,
Right.
the sacrifice, the sweat, now that you're like, man, am I making a difference? I mean, those are
Right.
real. I think if you're really in the trenches, you are really asking yourself some serious questions. You're having
Yeah.
some tough
Is this
nights.
going anywhere?
Yeah.
Right? How many
when-
times did you have those conversations?
Yeah.
Oh, hundreds,
You know?
especially the moments when you bury a young person. And so George and Benny, who lead our street outreach work, they've buried over 160 young people in the last 26 years.
Wow.
And so to think like, hey, you can ask yourself that plenty of times, am I making a difference? But hey, doing it in community. I mean, this idea of beloved community, even this mural we made here, is doing this together. How do we really come together? And we joke about it, but one of us wants to quit every week.
Yeah.
And so, hey, this week you're going to want to quit. I'm going to talk you off that and say, hey, keep going, pick you up,
Yeah.
hold you, hug you,
Here's a
pray
taco.
for you, give you some tacos. Let's keep going. And then, but you build this kind of resiliency. You build this family of faith. You build, and we push forward together. And we've faced tons of challenges through COVID, through violence in Chicago, et cetera. But I think it's the faith and the power of Christ that makes us resilient to be able to keep pushing through.
And 160 have been lost, and man, that's devastating. And their parents still feel the effects, and their friends and their classmates still see and feel the reality of that loss. But I ask myself, I guess when I hear you say that, I ask myself even another question: how many more would have been lost if New Life Centers in the church were not doing what they're doing? Right? How much higher could that number have been? Right? And so that's a devastating number and a horrible number for it to be a reality. But man, who knows if that number would be double, triple, quadruple what it is,
Right.
What I love about, New Life Centers is just this visible picture of just pushing back the darkness. Pushing back the darkness, literally going into dark spaces, dark places, sitting on the floor with people in empathy and servicing them and resourcing them and literally pulling them out, giving them an avenue out. And that's kind of the picture that I get or that I see. When New Life Centers first started, eating Little Caesars for 3 years. Can we just pause on that for a second?
I should have bought stock early on, by the way.
You know what I'm saying?
My kids, I live in Chicago.
Dude,
We have
Little
Chicago
Caesars is
deep
good.
dish pizza, and my kids still want Little Caesars. I pick
Man,
Little Caesars.
Listen, I like Little
Indoctrinated them.
Caesars.
You've
so-
indoctrinated them. $5, bro. You can't go wrong.
Hey, I like it.
You add different hot sauces, you mix it up. It can be all kinds of
Valentina, you know what I'm saying? But early on, when you guys were, getting started, right? I'm sure you guys had everything figured out. You had a full plan. Um, what what was there anybody that you guys were looking to as a model? Like, where did you guys get your inspiration for what was going to happen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I lead by learning and community. So I in the early years, look to Father Greg Boyle, who's a good friend. He's a Jesuit priest in Los Angeles. Actually, your dad, myself, and a group of us went out there in 2010 to see. They lead the now largest gang intervention program in the country.
Wow.
And he's been a mentor and a guide, and I can always check in with them. And when he sees announcements on the national news about Chicago and violence, he'll reach out and encourage and pray and walk with. And then local nonprofits. We have a strong network of churches and nonprofits here. So I have been blessed, and then even with the New Life, having men and women who have gone before, who are 10, 20, 30 years older than I am, who have been in the fight longer. I remember in the early years, two young kids I had, and Sarah and I were in a tough spot trying to lead a ministry, have young children. You have a new baby, and you're being fully taught what that means.
We're laughing with you. We're not laughing at you.
Straight induction by fire.
It's one of my favorite pastimes, watching new moms and dads settle in. But all that to say is there's people that have gone before that when we were struggling, we sat down with those who have been through it, who've been in ministry.
Yeah.
And you're not alone. They can guide you through and say, hey, this is normal. Hey, we were in the same spot. And then they give you the tools and the advice. And sometimes it's hard advice. I mean, we had a real hard sit down in the early years saying, man, there's always violence. There's always challenges. And Matt, you're out there running around like a fireman, to and fro all the time. But you're bringing that chaos, those fires into your home. And if you continue at this pace, you will be done in the next 2 years. And so listening to that hard advice and saying, okay, what adjustments can I make? And that's the beauty of it, is we've done all this in community. This isn't something Matt and Sarah have done alone. This is hundreds of volunteers, thousands of donors, and people who have come alongside, prayer warriors who say we've done this together. So I think that's the beauty. We wouldn't have done this without the community, the larger family of faith in Little Village, the larger family of faith in New Life as a whole, the body of Christ in Chicago. I got a dozen men and women I can text anytime who are in the fight, who are executive directors, pastors, who feel the same ministry weight that I do, but say, hey, keep going, or hey, and we pick each other up.
Yeah. You mentioned Father Doyle.
Father Boyle.
Boyle, in Los Angeles, and obviously he has a program there. And so was there any other organizations out there or
books
not-for-profits
or
books?
whatever that.
What taught you or influenced you guys in the early days, besides maybe just the community talking?
Yeah, I mean, Homeboy Industries, Straight Ahead Ministries out of Boston. Again, men and women who've been leading and guiding. And then now we partner, multiple times a week. I'm on the phone with national partners and local partners. So even now out of the White House, we have a dozen cities represented where we have a training ground where we meet and connect. Here locally, just this morning, I was on a call with the mayor's office and a dozen partners, and we have twice a week calls about how do we do this together, how do we build together, how do we connect. And so I think there's Breakthrough Urban Ministries here locally. There's Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation. There's dozens of churches here in Chicago doing amazing things. And I think I want to pause there for a second and say, Chicago has its challenges. We have a lot of violence. We're facing heavy things for sure. But let me tell you, the church is not sitting around twiddling its thumbs.
Yeah.
The body of Christ is active.
And that doesn't get enough coverage.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's not always the thing that makes it to the front page or makes it to any page is the work that is actually being done by faithful organizations of all size, right?
Yep.
And the church being at the forefront of that, making a difference in people's lives, right? People who are just they're 10 years back from where you are today, right? Just being faithful, right? Just doing whatever they can in their little small group, in their little ministry, in their little sports thing to be able to make a difference. And together, that does make a huge difference, right? And they're making a difference in people's lives.
I think one of the things, we're going to kind of transition here just a little bit. Josiah, I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to bring up this term. New Life Centers falls into this. We've kind of talked about this amongst our pastoral team, but the term transformational centers, right? And talk to us a little bit about that, how New Life Centers has really been a door, right, a way into communities that got us thinking a little bit different as well, where we're experimenting, we're dreaming. We're taking the dream that started in 2000 or 22 years ago with you and your wife, established in 2006, and now in this year, 2022, as we're thinking about the next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
How it's propelled us. But what does transformational centers mean? What would you say? How would you define that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of everything we've been talking about, right? It's when the church, it's when organizations, it's when ministries come together to say, hey, how can we take this from a place of darkness and make it a place of light? How can we take marriages that are falling apart and help them be restored? How can we take youth that are suicidal and help them see hope in tomorrow and in their future of what they can accomplish? And so I think it looks like all different types. I mean, ultimately, the transformation that we're looking for is a spiritual transformation at the core of their heart that would transform every area of their life, right? And this is what we believe with Christianity and the transformation that Jesus does, is that the transformation of the heart spurs on transformation in relationships, right? And that if people are touched and impacted by the gospel and know Jesus, and if that starts to continue to spread, really that should transform our neighborhoods, our families, right? Our communities, and ultimately our city and our world. And so, we feel like we've just, New Life's not the only place that God is doing things. And like Matt said, I mean, and my dad says this often, like we're just jumping into the stream of what God is already doing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, that's, what we're dreaming of a little bit for the future is continuing to, take these centers, right, and see where else God is asking us to plant, right? Mm-hmm. Almost like church planting. Like, is there other communities in Chicago? Matt mentioned that we're in 5 right now, but are there other communities around Chicago that we need to be in that that need mentoring, that need after school, that need the things deeper than that, right? And what we're really talking about: hope, peace, Christ, right? And so, kind of where does God take this? We'd like to expand across Chicago. And then is there room for New Life centers and New Life to be in other cities that are not Chicago? And so, we're dreaming and talking right now and thinking about the future, but we've been able to see what God is able to do, and so much bigger than we could ever possibly imagine. And so when God does something amazing, your faith is expanded. You start believing like, okay, God, can we could probably do even more for your kingdom, right? We could do even more. And it's those rocks that you look back to, right? Those places that you've set up as just moments in your life you can look back to and say, okay, these are the times where God has been so faithful. I just preached on this past week. And if God can do it in the past, then he can do it in the future, right? Yeah. Yep. And 2 Corinthians chapter 1 says, talks about the God who raises the dead. And that is the God that we believe in, the God who raises the dead, the God who can transform communities that people like, that one's past hope, right? That's who we believe in, the God who can take a marriage that's completely like on cliff's end and restore that, right? And bring it back to life. And so to know that underneath and in and through everything that we're doing is a God who has the power to bring dead things back to life. How could we not believe to transform bigger, cities, countries, worlds, right? Yeah. The dream gets bigger, right? Yeah. And to imagine what it started, what we could do, and it's pretty amazing. You mentioned something earlier. You said, New Life Centers is at a place right now where it's in a stride, not without its challenges, but just way bigger on a way different level than it was when it started. And you said, one of the questions was, if our church was not here, would it make a difference? Hands down, I could see right now when we talk about transformational centers, I think the fruit or the proof in that is that if New Life Centers wasn't here, there'd be a big gaping hole, for resourcing, mentoring, like all of the things that you guys have done is pushing back the darkness, right? And this is not a praise for one person, like you said, but for the whole team, for everybody that stepped up. Blood, sweat, and tears, right? People that you've had to bury, people that that you've brought from going through the program to becoming leaders within this whole partnership. You've talked about those stories to our pastors, which is phenomenal. One thing I thought about was the influence that New Life Centers has just in the city of Chicago. 2006 probably was really small, right? But 2022, talk to us about some of the conversations and tables you're being invited to sit at, because of New Life Centers and because of your guys' involvement with, intervention going into hard spaces. And
Yeah, and I think each year we've kind of, as you're faithful, God opens up a new door. So we started working with juvenile probation in the early years, 2007 into 2010. Then that opened up a door to work with Illinois Youth Corrections, and we started sitting and looking at how do we look at the system. Then we got invited in at the city level, started working with Department of Family Support Services. We connected in with the mayor's office in 2016 and started doing the mayor's mentoring initiative. And so each one of those years, we've kind of brought into new spaces and tables. And now, I mean, our team, just today, we sit on a citywide exec council for looking at violence and safety in the city. And I have twice a week a meeting working on that. We're at the education tables working with the heads of CPS of how do we transform educational centers. We're looking at literally physical spaces and parks. And so working with the parks, we've invested over $2 million into local infrastructure, lights at parks, new baseball fields. In a couple weeks, we have a grand opening of our new lights at our new park. In our sanctuary, we literally have a batting cage that comes down from the ceiling and is a safe place. And so it's about spaces, infrastructure.
But explain that though, Matt, because people may not get that. So, cool, Matt and centers, they're investing in parks and stuff, but why does that make a difference in people's lives? What happens when we have kids in these at a softball night or a baseball night, right?
Yep. So in Chicago and in many spaces, parents don't feel safe to send their kids to the park to play because of violence, because of shootings. And so in order to change really safety in a community, you have to change perceptions of safety. And so if somebody doesn't feel safe and doesn't feel like if they go to a park they're going to be safe, then they view it as not safe and they're not going to go there. So what we tried to do in a space, working with local nonprofits, another nonprofit here in the neighborhood, a couple blocks from here, there was a all grass field. I'll give you an example. And it sits on the gang dividing line. There was lots of violence that happened there. You wouldn't send your kids there to play after school. So we were able to work with the city, get a $2 million turf field installed. Cool, you can have a new turf field, but it can still sit empty because of perceptions of safety. So we started to unite and started programming that space consistently. We would show up and do family nights. The local nonprofit named Beyond the Ball would do Project Play, a family play night for 600 to 700 people. We now run, just last night, we had our soccer championship. In the summer, we run b-ball on the block there. And so consistently showing up and programming, so we physically improved it. We now programmed it. Now that place, every night, has hundreds of people playing. And so now you can start to change perceptions of safety. Kids feel like they can go there. And I remember when we first launched that space, it was an all-turf field, and a kid on opening night says, "Man, Matt, this doesn't feel like it's for us." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we can't have nice things. It's just going to get broken." So imagine if you're a child and you see a space.
That's your perception.
And your perception is that you don't deserve nice things because you haven't seen nice things.
Yeah.
And so our kids now, years later, man, our kids in Little Village and in the inner city on the south and west Chicago side of Chicago deserve just as nice spaces as kids on the north side or around.
Yeah.
Because these are public parks. These are spaces you should be able to go.
Yeah.
And so we partner with the city, partner with the parks. We leverage resources and partnerships and are able to improve these spaces. But then not only are you improving a physical space, that's nice, that's fine, but you're also now transforming a neighborhood, a block. Parents feel safe sending their kid there. Okay, they're going to come to our programming. They're going to build a relationship with us. We're going to be able to share love and hope and healing. And so it's not if you want to truly be a transformational center, it's not just Sunday proclamation and the word.
Yeah.
If we learned anything during COVID, if your Sunday celebration is shut down and that's all you got, you're up a creek.
Yeah.
But if you're truly looking at to be a transformational center, that's looking at the physical ills, the social ills, the spiritual ills, and all of those things, and saying, hey, if I feed somebody, that's a spiritual issue.
Yeah.
If I can play baseball safely and be out there, that's a spiritual issue.
Yeah.
If I can have high quality education and have a space where I can go send my kid to have a safe space during school, that's a spiritual issue, because as beings, all of that matters to us as it's our whole picture.
And you've told me before that on these nights you found a direct correlation on nights that you run sports, right? That violence goes down in the neighborhood, that there's less shooting and less violence on the nights that you're running sports, right?
Yep.
I mean, you've seen these clear lines drawn that we do this, we put on softball, right? We have this sports, and what happens is, less kids are murdered, right? Less people are shot. And so I think it's and you were telling me too, not just sports but food, right? You guys had these barbecue, all these, like, I forget, some ridiculous amount of hot dogs, like 5,000 hot dogs or something.
For 3 years.
And what did you find when you guys did that, Matt? You found that when you guys had food provided.
So this weekend, it's Memorial Day weekend right here around Chicago.
And it's nice weather.
Yep.
So we're expecting violence.
We spent $6,000 in hot dogs, hamburgers, and steaks.
Yep.
Wow.
And we partnered with our street outreach groups, and we went to guys in the neighborhood, many gang involved, and we actually brought the food to their parties.
So cool. I love this.
And we said, hey, we'll provide the food for your cookout. You're going to have a cookout regardless. We'll provide a couple $100 worth of food. What we want you to do, keep the peace. Don't go out on nonsense. Don't be involved in violence. Don't go out shooting. Hey, have a great party. Enjoy yourself. Be out there. So we provide all the food, and guess what? Last year, not a single shooting over Memorial Day weekend.
It's amazing.
Today, the Friday before Memorial Day, I just cleared. We're spending $5,000 on hot dogs and hamburgers. Yeah. We're going to go deliver this and walk with guys.
And this is what it means to be a peacemaker, though, right? I mean, this is the reality of saying, hey, we are fighting for peace in any creative way that it takes, in any way that's possible, because we don't want people to be killed. And what happens when there's not opportunities, when there's not things provided for, when there's not things for young people to do, a lot of times weather gets warm, right? You start, and then what happens is people start going out and killing each other, right? And just having this needless, senseless violence. And so I love the creativity of being able to combat and really be a peacemaker.
And I think that's what I'm thinking about when it comes to a transformational center. Transformational center is not just programmatic.
Yeah.
It's not. Right. It's people that get down deep into the roots of a system, or in the way that things have always been, and literally going to change, like even a plot of land and how people view it, or their safety, and through partnering with other, allocating or resourcing and negotiating with the city and all that other stuff. Like, you could think, well, what does New Life Centers have to be doing talking about park districts, right? Right. Well, it's because we have a vested interest in transforming the way people think about this space. Amen. Yeah. Right? And I think that's powerful, right? That's absolutely, and creates
and it's biblical,
door.
Right?
Yeah,
if we can transform the thinking, as we've been talking about mental health on Sundays. If we can transform the thinking, right? The Bible says then you can transform the action, right? So as a man think, so as they do, right? And so it's deeply rooted in the Bible and what the Bible and the truth of the Bible communicates to us as followers.
And it's theology of place. Place matters to God.
Yeah.
And we're placed specifically here. And it should be that Christians should be leading the way. And you've seen that throughout history. You've seen that through hospital networks. You've seen that all around. That it was the body of Christ leading the way in transformation. And so I think even this weekend, as we look at a map of the neighborhood, we see shootings, we see things spiked up. And we have now what we're going to try to do. We have 3 parks that we've worked in. But we noticed, there's increased shootings around these geographic areas. And so what we did is now this summer we're activating 7 new places in the neighborhood. Schoolyards at McCormick, 28th and Kedzie, Eli Whitney. And we saw literally on a map spikes in shootings, a heat map of shootings. So every night, weekly, we're going to be having a set night of, food, water balloons, bouncy houses, and spaces for that block to be able to create that safety for those families. Yeah. Wow. And in that, you'll build deep relationship. And so it's a new strategy for this year. But again, we've grown into that. And when you start with something small and you see an impact, then God opens up the door to next. Yeah. So
that's awesome. In the next episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about what we do on the ground, things just like this. We're going to talk about the food pantry, but also the type of person, right? Because it's not just anybody that is willing to go into a block where there's active shooting and put up bouncy houses, right? So we'll talk about that next one. But if you're feeling inspired, man, if you're listening to this and feeling inspired about this testimony of New Life Centers, New Life Community Church, working together to create transformation or to bring transformation to areas like the city of Chicago, I hope you're inspired. That's really our hope, our goal. Make sure you subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and share this with somebody that you think would also benefit from listening to this. And stay tuned as we talk about, again, New Life Centers in the next episode, what happens on the ground.